and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham-Pars incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Martin Willis, your host. And tonight we have a great guest coming up, and it is Erica-Lukes. We're doing the show live. I'm in Novorossiysk, Russia, on the Black Sea, going to Moscow in a couple of days for the remainder of the time here. And we'll be back in the States, hopefully, if I can get out, that is, in next week sometime. Anyway, before Erica-Lukes, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with the news in a minute. And I want to thank all the listeners that support the show. And if you can't support the show, we'd still appreciate each and every one of you. If you'd like to listen for free, all you have to do is come here at podcastufo.com on Wednesday evenings, 8 to 10 Eastern Standard Time. And also you can jump in the chat room to ask our guests a question at the same time. Or you can listen to the Dark Matter Digital Network on Thursdays at 10 to midnight Eastern Standard Time. So, Alejandro, how are you?
I am good. How are you? You sound tired.
Oh, I do. I'm trying to wing it, man. We have some interference.
Hello.
Yeah, it's really
calling Russia. Alejandro calling Russia. Come in, Russia.
Yeah. Well, it just seemed to clear itself up right now, so let's continue on, sir. How are you?
Okay, yeah, because I got a lot of stuff here, buddy. A lot of good stuff.
I'm just, you know what? You want to jump right into it?
Okay, let's do it. So let's see where to start. Okay, here's a cool one. This one was just written by Roger Marsh, of course, from MUFON. He's got a few interesting ones here. What I like about this one is this is a witness in Florida who saw a triangle UFO. Of course, those seem to be so popular, and we talk about that often these days. This was at 4 p.m. on February 10th on 2015, and he actually made this elaborate model of what he saw, and this model is so cool. It's like something out of Aliens or something. So it's kind of a mix of aliens and then what you typically see, you've seen in the triangle UFO thing. What I like about it is he's kind of done this thing where it's kind of older. It almost looks like ancient as opposed to a lot of the models like David Marler, for instance, has made. Everything looks newer, you know. So it's really cool. The most exciting thing I like about this is actually the model. The sighting is kind of typical. But the model is really cool.
Yeah, you know, for some reason, I can't see anything. It's too bad because I'm geo-blocked from your site here in Russia.
Yeah, I think it's probably the story I wrote about the, the Russian stuff. And, you know, I've not said some flattering things about Putin on your show here while you've been in Russia, so maybe it's that. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I have to apologize to a lot of foreign readers of our website have issues because for some reason, and we've nailed it down to, it's the ISPs. There are ISPs in other countries that for some reason have us blocked. We don't know why. So if that's happening to you, call your ISP and say, hey, this website can't come through, and they'll probably fix it for you. But yeah, kind of weird. Okay, moving on. From June 3rd, 2015, this is over Bossier City, Louisiana. There's a video, and the video isn't too fantastic, but, you know, this person said they saw cylindrical-shaped UFO. And in the video, what's interesting is you do see a plane, commercial plane, flying in the screen at the same time as this other white object. The plane looks like a plane. It's got a contrail, but the other object is just sitting there, and in contrast, it does not look like the plane. So that's kind of strange. So that's kind of an interesting video that was posted recently. However, more interesting to where you are right now, Paul Stonehill is a UFO researcher who does a lot of stuff about Russia. And he sent me a story to post that I'm really excited about called UFO Sightings in the 17th Century. So these are really old sightings. And what's neat is just the history. You know, he's writing about the Euro-Russia area. So this is like Belarus, a lot about Georgia, and the Ukraine and all of this with this amazing history. And in the West, we don't really know much about all of those areas and their history. So that's what's fun about this story. But he goes into like these records that have been that were found at the Metanadaran archives. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but there's this ancient building with it's just so mysterious and fun where they keep all of these ancient documents, and in those documents are some UFO sightings. One in particular near Robo Zero Lake in Russia that's pretty famous. And in this lake, it was in the 1663, all the people in this town saw this UFO. And it was, funny enough, very similar to what the Allagash guys described. It was this giant, bright orb, they said about 40 feet wide, that was coasting kind of over the water. Sure enough, there were people in the water that tried to go towards it, and they said they got so hot that they couldn't get close to it. It beamed some lights down into the lake, and the lights were so bright that they could see down into the water, the lights going down and hitting the ground and the fish scurrying away. But it also had these this blue smoke coming out of it, they said. So just a fascinating sighting. So this is a great story. And because it's a famous sighting, there are also some interesting art pieces that have been done to depict this sighting throughout the years. And so I've included a couple of those, and it's really cool. So Paul Stonehill actually also has a book out, a brand new book. Richard Dolan Press put it out about USOs, so underwater UFO sightings in Russia. So it looks like a great book. And finally,
wait a minute, I want to know if did they get any pictures or video? That's a joke.
That was
okay.
Cute. That's really
Sorry.
Funny. No, and then finally, this is just, we all knew this, but the interesting aspect of this next story is what's not included in the story. John Greenwald runs the blackvault.com, where he's got millions of pages of previously classified documents that he's received through the Freedom of Information Act. Well, recently he asked the FAA, which I believe it's not the first time, to send him their UFO files. Well, they did send him some files, like 2 pages, and supposedly this is all they have. And these 2 pages include their current policy on UFO reports that essentially say, we don't deal with them, call someone else. And the someone else, it says, call other organizations that look for UFO reports, such as the National UFO Reporting Center, which they've had listed for a long time. If it's life-threatening or it's dangerous, then call the police. Essentially, that's it. So they have this in a section of their safety, procedures, and then they have a Section 8, it's called, which is just their UFO reporting. Both the verbiage in both places is exactly the same. What's interesting, we kind of knew this, but it is still interesting that they have this. However, I think that what's stranger is that this is all. supposedly this is all they have on UFOs, nothing else, even though Erica, who you're going to talk to in a little bit here, has a case that, the FAA should be aware of. And, of course, I included video at the end of the story from the Chicago O'Hare case in 2006, where United Airline pilots and personnel reported a UFO over a gate at Chicago O'Hare, and it even closed down. They weren't flying out of that gate for a period of time. I mean, these were a lot of pilots and people, and, the guy who reported on it, John Hilkovich, had problems getting information from the FAA that denied it happened at all until he did a FOIA and got some information back from them. But certainly it seems like there would be more files. John agrees with that. John said that he is going to continue to seek files. He kind of outlines in the story how it's a little difficult with the FAA. But his thing is, they try to come off as they're not concerned about UFOs when, a lot of us have been doing UFO research or feel this way because, when we call the FAA, they don't seem to be concerned. Like if you're MUFON, they'll say, call MUFON. Well, we are MUFON. When, of course, they should be concerned about unidentified, objects in commercial airspace. That poses a threat, but they don't seem to want to take it seriously. So those
Absolutely.
are my 2 stories for the week, my friend.
Well,
my comrade.
That just says a lot right there, especially when it comes to airspace, and how could they possibly not pay attention to that or want to know about that? That just,
It would be very irresponsible on their part. And it seems it is. It really does. And what's great is in these videos that I included from John Hilkovich was the struggle he had, which was very similar. He's a writer for the Chicago Tribune, and the struggle he had is very similar to the struggles we have, trying to get information. And that's what's exciting about Erica's case that you're going to talk about in a little bit here is the great work they did and the exciting information they were able to retrieve. But it's unfortunate.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I love the story, the 17th century story you just told. That is really quite amazing.
It is. It's such a great story. I love these historical stories. It was fun because my part was essentially just to research some pictures and stuff and make myself a little more familiar with some of it. And it was just so fun to look this stuff up because these areas of Europe, the areas that you're in, are beautiful. They have this history that we're not aware of that is just fascinating. It's so rich in history. And so it's really fun to have people like Paul Stonehill to translate some of this information and then enlighten us over here in the West on some of these incredible stories.
Yeah. They have here a lot of ancient stone structures, and they say, they don't know if they're 5,000 years old or 25,000 years old. And that's the thing about stone. You can't date it. Why they can't really exactly date the pyramids or anything like that. So, yeah, there's some really interesting things over here. And this is real history.
Yeah.
Hey, man, well, thanks for helping us out here.
It's my pleasure, my friend, and it was great talking to you. Have fun with Erica, and have a great show.
All right, man. Talk to you next week.
See ya.
All righty. Okay, so a little bit about our guest. Erica-Lukes became interested in the subject of UFOs at age 6 when she picked up her first book on UFOs. Jeez, I'm wondering if I was reading then. Wow. She has spent the last 25 years studying the phenomena with her interest focused on abduction research. Dr. John Mack, Bud Hopkins, Kathleen Martin, and Dr. Frank Salisbury have been an inspiration to her. She joined MUFON and became a field investigator after several unexplained sightings she had in the Salt Lake Valley, and her sightings were very similar to those of Dr. Lynn Katai, the Phoenix Lights, And after researching MUFON Case, she became convinced that there's been unexplained phenomena for decades and that most of them are related. That's an interesting statement. Erica, how are you?
You know what? I'm good, and I think I might be a little fresher than you are, you poor boy, over there at the wee hours of the morning.
Oh, well, I sort of prepared for this, and no, I'm excited to do the show. I'm really glad. You know what? This is the last week because I'm landing next Wednesday. Hopefully there won't be any glitches, and I'll actually be able to get out of Russia and do the show live next week at regular hours, but it's going to take me about 3 or 4 days to adjust to the time difference for sure. So how's everything going in Utah?
Everything's pretty groovy. It's Utah's a very interesting place, as you know, and I think the more I research, along with my assistant friend, who was the assistant state director for MUFON, Jeff Cox, we're just making some really interesting observations, and we're hoping to get good funding so we can get equipment out in the field and really do good research.
Uh-huh. Now, Alejandro mentioned the case that you were working on, this kind of a big deal. Can you, well, first of all, before we get into any of that, for the listener that this is the second time you've been on the show, so the listener that's not familiar with you, can you kind of, I just read your bio basically, but can you talk a little bit more about sightings you've had and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up and I was raised with a mother, incredibly intelligent, but very, she was very open-minded, or she let me form my own opinions. She is amazing. And I always had an interest in this subject. And as I look back at my life, there are some interesting things that happened, in my life. And I don't know if that's kind of pushed me to where I am now, but in 2013, I was sitting on my deck looking over at the valley, and my friends were there, and we observed this bright orange ball, hovering over the Salt Lake Valley. And it was very strange. It was kind of a different color. It was very self-contained, I guess you would say. And then a little one dropped out of the bigger one, and we're watching the little one kind of go around in a circle and just thinking, okay, this is really interesting. And I had been on my porch and I, it's so beautiful outside, and I listened to, I watched the airplanes coming in. It's a flight corridor for the international airport, watch the helicopters. It's just, I love to look at the sky. I always have. And it was so interesting to me and my friends that I began to every night set up my video camera, and I videotaped for a couple months different variations of this object. Sometimes it would come up from the front side in front of the mountain range and hover for 10 minutes and then fly off in one direction, and then another one would come up from the same place, and same thing. And you could not see, even with binoculars, you could look at it. There were no lights. It was a solid object. It was not moving in a way that is consistent with any conventional craft. So I was intrigued, and I wanted to know, okay, what is this in our airspace? This is curious. So I began to call, I called everybody, because that's just kind of the way I roll. So I called, Dugway Proving Ground. I called Hill Air Force Base. I called our observatory here just to try to get any input. And, of course, I know this is a big shocker to you, but I didn't really get anything from, Dugway or Hill Air Force Base, but which, we never will. But it was kind of fun to call them. And, I found New Fork. I submitted a report with Peter Davenport, and he was very helpful, very kind, very intrigued. And I'm sure you know that he is quite passionate about these orange fireballs, as he calls them.
Yeah.
So, it was interesting. I filed some reports. I saw some peculiar things. I began reaching out, watching videos, doing research, and I found that there were patterns, I felt, of these objects that were seen in areas, military installations. You've got Native American reservations. You've got places that, they're right in airspace, and it was just so fascinating. So I became a field investigator for MUFON. Then eventually I became state director, and it's, I don't know. It was fascinating. And I wanted to learn as much as I could. I wanted to talk to, and I still, every day I'm talking to somebody from all over the world about this, somebody who's had a sighting, somebody that has information, somebody that's been researching, so I can compile all of this information and then hopefully really do some groundbreaking research.
Wow. No, you think about it, and you probably don't even realize this, but you're probably one out of maybe even 20 or 30 people that went so far to report what you saw.
Yes.
I'm sure you are aware of that a very small percentage of these things get reported, and you didn't give up after you called these air bases. Nobody wanted to help you, basically, and then you went online and figured out how to do it. And it's kind of like salmon swimming up a stream. There's only a couple that get up there, and that's what you did, which is great. And obviously, this changed your life, and it's probably made it a lot better in a way that's made it a lot more interesting, don't you think?
Oh, well, I mean, I've been really blessed that I've had a fascinating life, and this is just another chapter in my fun and fascinating, life. But it is, to me, this is the most profound thing that I will ever do, and it has allowed me to establish relationships with some amazing people I will be friends with for the rest of my life, and researchers that I have tremendous respect for. And that is a real it's a gift. I love it. And I also feel compelled to do something good, because I think that we're at a really pivotal time right now. And I think we have the opportunity to see that this is really kind of thrust into the media spotlight, taken seriously by political figures. And I think that we can get some good research done and hopefully start to maybe figure out what we're dealing with.
Yeah. I think that's, it really is, when I think about science, 99.9% of science not taking any of it seriously, mostly because it's not a repeatable thing. It's it's something that happens randomly in a flash in the pan and all that. But I just hope that more people do take it seriously, and we actually figure out what the heck it is. I don't. I got some hate mail recently when I said that I don't put these UFO sightings in the same box as I do other paranormal events, although there could be some relationship there. But it's just the way they're witnessed, and solid objects are witnessed, and all that. But it does puzzle me why there aren't more people taking it seriously. Even maybe it takes a sighting like you had, or something. But I'm sure there are people in science that have had sightings.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for me as a researcher and learning more about this, I think that we need to understand that we really don't know where the paranormal leaves off and where the UFO phenomena begins. And I think sometimes we try to really rationalize this, or say, if it's a UFO, it has to be a solid craft. It has to behave like this. It can't behave like that. And that's really dangerous, because, this isn't human. And so I think for a long time, organizations and different researchers have been waiting for nuts and bolts craft. And I believe that what we're dealing with is not nuts and bolts. I believe that through my research and what I'm finding, and I hope to really get out there, that we need to really be taking seriously the orb phenomenon and know that this is something that can be seen in the sky, that can come in your bedroom, can be seen over power lines. And again, we don't know where paranormal, UFO, where the lines separate if it does.
Right. Yeah, this let's talk quickly about the orange orb involvement you have as far as research. Is Terry Ray still involved in that?
I actually talked to him last week. I love Terry. He's so awesome. He's been busy doing other things, and I still reach out to him, and he gets case reports from all over the world. And I love reaching out to him. Robert Spearing, who was really instrumental on Project Orange with MUFON, he and I are still communicating and sharing things, and I'm still working with him on that. And then I've also, I've got Jeff Cox, who has been taking all the research, all the data from the New Fork database and compiling that. And so we are going to have a map that we can layer one layer over the other and look at where these sightings clusters are occurring and try to put the pieces together, because they're obviously in specific locations. And this is something that's, you have, centuries old documentation. They're appearing in the same place. They might be coming over populated areas and interacting with people maybe a little bit more than they were. But it seems to me, this would be something that I would just throw out there, that they would be maybe coming and going from a specific location.
Now, would you consider these days that the orange orbs are right up there with triangle sightings? Or do you happen to know?
Oh, well, in my, opinion, I think that the orange orbs I think that you see a lot more sightings reports of orange orbs than you do triangles. So.
Wow. Okay. Now, is there a percentage of them that are noted as Chinese lanterns?
This goes back to, that's a great question. And you know how I feel about the Chinese lantern. You were just going to get me going tonight, mister. I think that what I have noticed, and what other people working on Project Orange, what we've noticed, is that a lot of times investigators classify, or they'll dismiss credible sightings, and they will attribute them to Chinese lanterns. When if you look at the weather data and you look at the time these objects are in one fixed position, the way they behave, you can automatically rule out that they're Chinese lanterns. And so my big thing has to always been to educate investigators, because we're not getting the quality of reports we need to get. So we end up going through the database and looking at these cases, and even if they're classified an explainable object, we have to go in and redo the investigation because the data is wrong, or that the findings are wrong. It's interesting. Wow.
Now, I did want to, one of the things I wanted to talk about was I guess we'll call it a shortwave or ham radio sighting. I guess that's how it all started. This was an American Airlines pilot basically was reporting UFO, and it was overheard on a ham radio. This turned out to be a pretty big deal, so let's hear about it.
Oh, yeah, this is such a cool case, and I am grateful. And again, I just have to say I love my Utah peeps. They're fantastic. But I have a friend, his name is Pat Daniels, and he is host of Fringe Radio, a great radio show. He and I we talk quite frequently, and he's seen some interesting things over the Salt Lake Valley. But on one particular night, he was sitting at his desk. It was, a little bit after 12 o'clock, and he scans the ham frequencies, as he's done for 20 plus years. He's a very proficient ham radio operator, and he was listening. This conversation caught his attention because without announcing the plane, this pilot said to the Salt Lake City approach tower, do you have this object on radar? We are seeing this object. And then there's a few seconds that go by, and then there's another transmission. It's American Airlines Pilots 434 is coming from San Francisco to Philadelphia, and he is saying that we've got this, I see a large orange square. And so it was really, go ahead.
No, square. You just said square.
Yes, a large orange square, which is so weird.
That is one you don't, I think Jan Harzan had a sighting as a kid with something similar to that. And then that's just something you don't hear, especially orange.
No, it was interesting because he had said that he'd been watching this object for quite some time, and so it was peculiar enough that it alarmed Pat, and he contacted me and we talked, and he said, I've scanned ham frequencies for 20 years. I have never heard anything like this.
Wow.
And so it was good enough for me to know that I needed to act immediately. So I got on to the ATC website, and my assistant state director and I, Jeff Cox, found the recordings from that specific frequency, and we started downloading all of them. And then I knew at that point I needed to get somebody who was really proficient with FOIA requests and obtaining radar data. And so I contacted Bill Puckett from UFOs Northwest. He was excited too, as we all were, and we went through the tapes and we found a specific portion of the tape where you could hear the American Airlines pilot talking to Salt Lake City Approach, and they're talking about this large orange square. And then the approach tower says, this is, the pilot says, is this, can you give me, some sort of clarification as to where we are? And I'm putting more words in there than is actually in the conversation. And he said that you're coming over Nephi, Utah. We did a FOIA request to obtain radar data, to obtain audio and the flight tower logs. And it was the seventh sign of the apocalypse because we actually got all of those back, even though after all of that, we found out that some of the audio had been redacted, but the radar we got was off the charts. In fact, I don't know if there's ever been a case quite this compelling with the radar data.
Ooh, let's talk about it.
So the radar data we found was we had almost 200 hits, and the radar returns are too far away to be ground targets. They were in an area that was kind of straddling I-15 in a remote part of Utah, kind of between Nephi and Levan, Utah. And you can look, and if you go on UFOs Northwest, you can see the radar returns, and Bill did a great animation. We also have a video of the area out there, so you know that there is nothing out there. And we sent the radar returns, because they were so unusual, to another person overseas to look at them who's an expert. And they agreed that this was something very anomalous that was taking place.
Now, I'm on that page now, and anybody can look at it. I put a link in the chat room, and I'm seeing these blue dots. Is that part of the returns?
Let me just go where you are. Let's see. The blue dots. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, I'm just trying to... So there's the Doppler, and then you've got the primary returns, and the blue dots in the straight line. That is the flight of that's the path of the aircraft.
I see. Uh-huh. So there were over 200 returns. And was this thing actually moving along with the airline?
From what the witness, Pat Daniels, said initially, he heard the pilot say that this object was keeping pace with the plane. From what the radar is showing us, this object was in a location, a specific location, for over a half an hour. And it seemed to be, you've got the video of the way the radar returns are taking place, and there's one second, and then 2 miles away there's another one. And so it's just fascinating.
Now, when this happened, is NICAP, excuse me, also another organization that you would try to reach out to?
NARCAP, I did.
NARCAP, yeah.
Yes. Actually, I did talk to Ted Rowe about this case several times, and he thought it was quite unusual. And I know that Bill Puckett was talking to, Dr. Haynes about the case, and he as well thought it was a really, really great case. So it's fun to deal with people like that are very hardcore about looking and analyzing data, and understand when you have radar returns like this that it is, and you've got all of these other things, the fact that there's nothing in the area, the fact that it couldn't be A, B, C, or D, that you have a good case, plus you've got the audio, which makes it an even better case.
But as far as you know, the pilot has not come forward and filled out a report with any organization?
No.
Yeah. Which is probably 90% of the time, I would imagine.
It is, and it's too bad. And I know that, Ted Rowe and I have had this conversation along with many other people. It's sad that pilots feel that if they talk about it, they'll be persecuted. I've talked to a couple pilots with regards to stuff that was taking place over the Salt Lake Valley that I've been working on. And, they've said, yeah, you used to be ostracized. But I had one pilot that said, but basically we're just, there's so much paperwork. They make it really, really difficult to file reports. Who would want to?
Yeah. And are you fairly certain they actually removed some of the audio?
That is what Bill Puckett's analysis shows. Oh. So, and also you have, my witness, Pat Daniels, who heard something, and I believe everything he has said has been spot on and very truthful. So I have no reason to doubt him.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, it's an amazing case. And where is it kind of at a standstill at this point, or are people still looking into it?
This is one of those cases that I will always be looking into. I think all of us will be, because to me, a case like this should never be an open and shut case, even though it typically, that's the way it reads in the MUFON CMS. To me, this is one piece of the puzzle that I can put together, and then I can look back through databases and see that there were other pilots that had similar things. And so I actually did talk to another commercial pilot who had a sighting and made a report a few months earlier in the Salt Lake Valley, but he was a witness on the ground, and he was taking his trash out, looked up and saw some very curious orange lights that were hovering and behaving in ways that he knew commercial aircraft wouldn't. He also said that they were flying in an area that you typically would not fly, because we've got a lot of restricted airspace here.
Right.
Since we've got the NSA and all of that fun stuff and Dugway Proving Ground. But he said that he was just shocked, and then he went inside, was scanning radio frequencies, and heard the pilot and the tower, the approach tower, talking about this object again. It was, do you have it on radar? All of this stuff. And he said it was incredibly strange. And he told me, he said, I'm a pilot. I've been doing this my whole life. And there are things you say over the air, and there are things that you don't. There's a protocol. There's etiquette. And so to have anything like this is unusual. So there are 2 reports. Think of how many other reports are out there. Oh, yeah.
Now, on the returns, did it show anything unusual about the movement of the object?
The movement of the objects, it wasn't, like I was saying, it was kind of in one location, but you could have one one return, and then 2 seconds later, you wouldn't see that return, and you'd have a return 9 miles away.
Oh.
So it was crazy. And I think, too, when you look at the returns, when you look at figure 7 that Bill Puckett has, it's a very interesting shape. I mean, you can almost see this grid-like pattern at the bottom.
Wow. So it sounds like, now, did they visually talk about anything about it moving at all, or was it just that brief, those brief statements?
As far as I understand from Pat, it was just the brief statements saying this object was keeping pace with the plane.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. So
I know, isn't that cool?
It really is, and an unusual craft to top it off. So
very unusual, but I definitely, like I've always said, there is so much going on here in Utah, and unfortunately, we typically don't look up. And I hope if I can do anything is just make this something more palatable for people, and so they'll look up and pay attention to their surroundings. If at the very least we do it from a safety standpoint, because we are so close to all of these military installations, we should pay attention.
Right. And it's almost like it would be, I'm kind of going off topic here, but, because it seems like there's less younger people getting involved. It would really be great if you could actually talk about something like this in the schools, just like, not making any claims, but, telling kids to look up. Don't look at their iPad anymore. Look up at the sky. And
I think that you're right. I think that's so important. And I mean, that could be a whole another show about that, because we're losing so much. I think we're not connecting with our intuition, which is something that, and we don't connect with other human beings. We don't connect with our environment, and we miss out on so much. And that really doesn't benefit anybody. And for me, just even being a MUFON investigator, and beginning to learn about our natural environment, it's been so cool.
Right. Now, someone had asked earlier on the chat room if you thought these orange orbs could be interdimensional. These are just thoughts and opinions.
And that was Ryan, and I love Ryan Sprague. He's so awesome. He's such an accomplished guy, and I'm really happy to know him. But I do think that they could be extraterrestrial, interdimensional. I think that we just don't know. And that's the problem with all of this. None of us have any clue about what we're dealing with. When I look at some of the research done by, Jacques Vallée, some of the people that were at Skinwalker Ranch researching that, other people that have spent their life doing that, most of them do believe that we're dealing with something that is terrestrial, interdimensional. So who knows?
Someone asks a question on the message board: is religion in conflict with UFOs? That's quite a question.
I'm sure it is. I think that most religions, I would hope, and I'm a very spiritual person. Let me just put it this way, but I'm not, I don't go to the Mormon church like I should. I've been so bad, but, I think that most religions have a mindset that we're not the only thing out there. And if they didn't, I think they're certainly becoming much more open to that idea, because, even the Vatican realizes that we're not the only game in town. And at some point in time, we need to start changing our thinking, and they need to do it in a public sense, so they're not losing face, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And I agree. The Catholic Church has been doing that. As a matter of fact, we're even going to offer baptizing, which I think is pretty, I don't know. That's my opinion. I think it's kind of funny to think that if someone came here from another planet, they'd want to be baptized. That's all. I don't know if you ever heard that.
No, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we do, the LDS Church baptizes for the dead, so I would think, yeah, why not?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's, it's a topic that a lot of people say that, that they just couldn't handle it, but I agree. I do think that, they have to have it somewhere in the dialogue with all of these Earth-like planets being found and all that. And I think that's, actually opening up the door to a lot of things and possibly actually taking things more seriously. Just the discovery of all these Earth-like planets. Absolutely.
I mean, I think at some point in time, we will stop being so egocentric and thinking we're the only game in town. I mean, we can't think that forever. We're not. And we make new discoveries on our planet every day. We know a fraction about our own planet. So
right.
I think that we will, we're getting used to that idea, and that's a great thing. I think at some point in time, the UFO topic or the paranormal will not be a fringe topic, and I don't think it should be. This shouldn't be a fringe topic. This shouldn't be about a belief system. This should be about discovering things that we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's not fringy to me.
Yeah. Well, the fact is there are answers for whatever it is. It's just, trying to discover the answers, even, paranormal. I mean, just trying to discover what the answers are has been the challenge. And actually, someone writes on the message board, define something with consciousness. There's just so many things that we don't know that you can't really define or have any scientific, notion as to what they are, basically.
Right.
I know we're way off topic here, and it's all my fault.
I like it.
Yeah.
You got to be able, you got to roll with it. You got to go.
Yeah. Speaking of rolling with it, you have a show. Let's tell the listening audience when that is and all that.
I do. It's called UFO-Classified. It's Friday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's a 2-hour show, and it is on KCOR Digital Broadcasting Network. It's been a ton of fun, and I get to, just like you, interview the best and brightest researchers, experiencers, people in the field that have relevant things to contribute, and I love it. It's fun. I love doing radio. It's so cool to connect with people and to hear their stories and to try to expand people's minds.
Right. Sometimes live radio is a little tough, as the listeners in the chat room that were here last week will understand exactly what I'm talking about. You and I had a conversation about it earlier. But,
dear.
Yeah. And, I've had some trouble since I've been here with my computer. I finally got everything straightened out, and I'm here for the last week. So, but at least better late than never. So we're coming up to about 10 minutes on the hour, and I wanted to discuss with you about, you and I briefly sent an exchange about UFO research and how it's going to, it would be better if it was taken a little more seriously, and let's talk a little bit about your thoughts on that.
It's been interesting for me too. I've always been kind of on the periphery of things, and I've always studied and read about it, and it wasn't until 2013 that I really dived into it and said, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to make a contribution, and to get in there and to begin to understand some of the politics and game playing and unprofessional behavior was a shock to me, because I'm a businesswoman. I am a nice person. I don't understand where any of this is coming from, and it was very curious for me to watch when we're all trying to do the same thing and we're all volunteering. We're doing this on our own dime. why is it that people are so derogatory and backbiting? And there was so much of this lower level nonsense going on that it becomes very distracting from everyone's real mission. And so,
now, why do you think I've seen this happen in many different ways in the 4 or 5 years that I've been really involved in this. And why do you suppose it happens? Is it egos? What is it?
I think it's exactly what it is. I mean, obviously we're not getting paid, and so I think some people are very concerned about their egos. I think some people want to be in the spotlight. I think some people want to make money and find ways to capitalize on that without the best intentions. I think that there are lots of little things that go on, but with that said, there's 99% of the people that I see doing this are incredible human beings, hardworking, willing to share information, willing to work together and take a lot of grief for doing it. So I think that there are so many good human beings, and I think it is really unfortunate that a small percentage can be so derogatory and behave like not even 2-year-olds. I think 2-year-olds would behave better than some of these people, but...
Well, I saw a little bit of that going back to the case I promised my listeners I would never talk about again, is the Roswell slides. And I'm bringing this up for a point. I saw where people were researching, that it was a mummy type of situation, and but they could have done it nicer. You're never going to get real far if you're arrogant or just plain nasty, like you're saying. And I was kind of shocked at some of the statements made because. Yes, there was an issue there, but, there's different ways of being belligerent about something doesn't help a point come across any better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that that was one thing that I noticed, and I noticed it in, all over social media, just this, I don't know, it was like a lynch mob mentality. And I thought, oh my Lord, I mean, you can say what you want about Jaime Maussan, and people have very valid concerns, and that's great. Whatever. For me, I was working for the MUFON Communications Department, and we were getting ready to bring Jaime in. And I think, Grady's had some cases that are questionable, yada, yada. He's also done good things in and of the fact that he has kind of given a voice to Latin America. He's made it okay and comfortable to talk about. So there you have it. But when I was doing all of this, it's like I am getting ready for the radio interview, where I'm interviewing him, and I'm talking to Kurt Collins. I'm trying to reach out to the Roswell Research Group. I'm trying to find all of these people that have to do with it, and the people that are the biggest critics in social media. Like, why are you feeling this way? Where are you coming from? And I thought it was really nasty. And I think it's, that's great. We don't believe in this, or we want to try to do things. But I think at some point in time, we need to kind of get our focus on what we need to do, which is figuring out what this is, not working really hard to discredit people. And that's my opinion.
And I do want to say that not everyone was like that. That's all. There were a group of people that were in that particular situation. Social media were really, as we said.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's like an interesting social. I mean, you just watch all of these things, and you look at the dynamics and see things, and I don't know. I mean, for me, I try really, really hard to understand everyone's viewpoint, because I think everyone has a bit of validity to their viewpoints. And
they do, you know, just like Shane is saying up on the message board, it may have come across nasty, but more research needed to be done before making the claims, which is, you know, of course, that's totally true. You know, that it was an extraordinary claim to make with the amount of research that was, you know, that was done.
You know, and that's an interesting comment. And I think for me, when I was dealing with this, I can't even tell you, probably 30 plus hours on the phone with Jaime. I mean, I was talking to him almost every day, and he was giving me research from all of these PhDs and different people that I was looking at and privy to. And to me, the amount of research that they put into it was quite substantial. And I think when it was disseminated to the public, or when certain people took bits and pieces and gave that out, of course, it seemed like they didn't research stuff. But I've got a whole file cabinet full of stuff. So it was just, you know, I mean, that was interesting for me to see that. But
well, how come they couldn't deblur it? That's, you know, that's my main question. I mean, it was deblurred in less than a few hours once the image was up.
You know, that's a great question, and I think you get lots of different answers on that. Of course, there's a conspiracy theory element, you know, and then there's what Jaime would have said about it, and that's about where I kind of just said, okay, I did my radio interview, thank you, I'm done. And I think, you know, I mean, but I will absolutely say that I don't believe that with the amount of research that those people put into it, you know, I mean, you've got Tom Carey, Don Schmidt, none of those people were doing anything for malicious purposes. They really believed what they were doing.
Yeah, I think that about those two as well. So enough said about that. I always get mail when I talk about this particular case. I do think it was kind of a black eye. Fortunately, though, it wasn't covered by media enough to cause a lot of damage, in my opinion. And I think that had to do with it being down in Mexico.
Yeah, and again, it's like when I did talk to all of them, I mean, they said that they tried to approach people in America and they wouldn't do it, and that people are so nasty here. Would you blame them? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I really think that we do need to kind of tone it down a little bit and not go on the attack all the time. Great. So somebody thinks that they can come up with something, then work with them. I mean, I think that's what Jaime and all of those people said the whole time. If any of them would have reached out in a nice way to say, hey, we think we've got this evidence, then they would have been great. Show it to us. But it was attack.
Now, I heard recently that there was a report by someone talking about Hillary Clinton saying that, basically that she didn't really mean what everybody, or she doesn't really mean anything by this UFO disclosure type thing, and she's going to look into it and all that. And I heard that she was, now I'm just saying this secondhand because a UFO researcher called me the other day, pardon me, and asked me if I'd seen the article, because they said that this person was being attacked viciously by the UFO community. So we're at it again, as far as I can tell.
Oh, honestly, isn't that too bad?
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Again, this is all secondhand, and I'm sure someone could look it up and see the article. I never had time to, but let's talk about some of the bigger cases that you've been involved in. Can you talk about, besides, of course, this ham radio one is a major case, but let's talk about some of the other ones you've been involved in.
So I have one of my favorite cases that I worked on was October 2nd, 2014. And if you can hear my naughty little creatures in the background, just don't pay any attention. I think the hellhounds have been unleashed or something. But we had, October 2nd, I received a phone call from Fox 13 News, and it was, like 2:00 in the afternoon. Excuse me. And they were saying, Erica, do you have any reports on this? We are getting flooded with phone calls. Our chat room is getting all of these pictures of these objects hovering above Salt Lake Valley. And so I hadn't heard anything, but then, I ran home, got on my computer, started looking at these photos, and there were these white, there were like 5 to 7 of them spheres hovering from what witnesses told me, upwards of an hour at a time, and then moving in incredibly bizarre ways. So it was a highly unusual case because you've got daytime sighting and you've got hundreds of witnesses all over Salt Lake Valley. And I started getting in touch with anybody. In fact, there's still some YouTube videos that were posted. One in particular that was really intriguing where these objects were moving so quickly, it is insane. The really interesting thing here is that these objects were seen, one witness reports them, is seeing them over the NSA, which, as we know, is the most restricted airspace in the world. And some witnesses, I went out to interview a group of witnesses in an apartment complex, and there were 8 of them there that were out in a courtyard looking up, and they said that they all felt, and it was very interesting because the air around them was very eerie. They couldn't hear any sounds where normally they would hear birds, different things. And they also said that they're always used to having aircraft fly overhead. And they said in the whole hour and a half that they were watching these objects, they didn't see any planes but military aircraft that were on the periphery, and one witness stated that they seemed to be observing these objects. So the next day, you get reports that made, international news because these objects were seen over in Breckenridge and parts of Colorado. They went to NORAD. This really great reporter went to NORAD. Nothing. The police saw it, so they were unusual, and we did some great work on that.
And what did NORAD have to say?
NORAD didn't have anything to say. They didn't know what it was.
Oh, but did they admit to anything, or did they just say they didn't track anything?
They said they couldn't. They had no clue what it was.
Wow, sounds like a great case. And when did this happen?
This happened October 2nd of 2014, and here's the really cool thing about this case. I did, again, realizing, okay, this is a mass sighting. We've got to get on it. And so I did a FOIA request for radar data, and I got back the radar data, and it was unreadable text format, which was highly unusual because you have to be incredibly specific when you're requesting radar data, and we did a great job. And I talked to the FAA and said, hey, you're not sending us what we requested. Oh, no. Send me back another CD, or send me back more information, another disc. They sent it back, and it was exactly the same thing. So flash forward to this new case that I've got with the ham radio operator. And I, on a whim, just thought, okay, I'm going to send this data to Bill again and see if he has anybody that can analyze this. And he did find somebody that could finally put together enough to know that there were anomalous objects and there were a lot of F-16s in this area, the times of the sighting.
Wow. So you think that they were actually observing
that would be my guess. I mean, this is what we have numerous witnesses saying, here and in Colorado. I think you've got the fact that there was very little air traffic in the area, so something was going on there. The whole thing was just curious. And like I said, this was taking place above restricted airspace. This was taking place in just areas where it's the flight corridor for the international airport. So if they were testing Google Loon balloons or doing some other type of thing, they wouldn't be doing it in that airspace.
Yeah. And as a lot of people know this already, but, if someone is messing around in restricted airspace, it's not taken lightly at all.
No. It isn't.
People if they're not responding to radio, then they're not shot down, but they're basically escorted out of the air traffic and then arrested. So
right.
This is that's a good one. Someone mentioned up on the message board Skinwalker Ranch, and I always love talking about that. How deeply have you looked into that whole situation?
Skinwalker Ranch is such an interesting place to me, and I look into it and try to get as much information as I can. And again, my filing cabinet has a big Skinwalker section, the Uinta Basin section, because it is truly a unique area. I don't think there's not anything like it. I mean, they're very similar places, but it is truly unique. And we still have sightings or reports that will come in from people that are cattle ranchers where cattle are mutilated, where you're seeing these mysterious orbs. There are reports of increased military activity in that area. So it continues to be a unique place. And I don't think, even though maybe the good stuff that was happening at Skinwalker Ranch has died down, I don't believe it's left the Uinta Basin. Maybe it's just relocated. Who knows?
And this just may be a dry spell, because there were, Native Americans talking about things going on there, as their folklore basically for forever.
Yeah, exactly. I have been doing, and I've been really lucky, and I've talked about this on other shows, but I have a client of mine, her husband is one of the world's foremost Native American historians. And he worked at the University of Utah for a long time, and he's in his 80s, but he was gracious enough to talk with me. We went to lunch, and then he also let me borrow some of these they're out-of-print books from his library about the oral traditions of the Navajo with regards to the Skinwalkers. And wow, I mean, that's a trip.
Yeah, let's hear about that.
Their Skinwalkers they're witches, and they thrive on chaos. They thrive on death and dismemberment. Anything evil is how they seem to get their power. And in an area like Skinwalker Ranch, where the area was supposedly cursed, you have reports of skinwalkers. I have spoken with people who tell me that, unfortunately for all of us, that skinwalkers can be observed anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be in locations like Skinwalker Ranch. So, which is disturbing. So, but the one thing he did tell me, and he's a Navajo, a very kind man, he did share with me some experiences his family had with skinwalkers. He said that the belief is that at night you don't sing, you don't chant, you don't go outside, you don't draw attention to yourself. And if a skinwalker is to approach, that you turn your eyes, you don't pay any attention, you go about your business, and you just pray.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? I know, it is so crazy. That is one thing that is really, when I talk to people that have had skinwalker experiences, they are truly some of the most frightening things that I've heard. And I believe it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, in that particular situation in that ranch, for the listener, most people have heard about this, but for the listener who hasn't, just in a nutshell, there were all kinds of things going on. It started out with cattle mutilations. Well, it started out actually with a very large dog, like a way oversized dog. I think they shot it and nothing happened, no blood or anything. And then there was cattle mutilations, UFOs. This is all in the Skinwalker Ranch. Things being taken and reappearing in different places. In other words, a post hole digger was being used. The guy turned around and it was gone. Ended up being in the top of a tree, and all kinds of weird stuff. Bought by Bob Bigelow, who sent scientists up there, and they did some research, and only a few things happened. It's almost like as soon as it was being observed, things did not happen as much, but they did have an incredible accounting of almost like a portal showing up and some creature crawling out of it, which is really bizarre.
Yes, it is. It is, and I think that's from people that I know that I've talked to, specifically Dave Rosenfeld and Ryan Burns, who are friends of mine and researchers in Utah. And Ryan lives up right next to Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, they have mentioned exactly the same types of things that were talked about in Hunt for the Skinwalker. So you've got these strange creatures. Ryan has photos of a very large wolf-like creature. He has seen, in fact, he had men in black, the quote-unquote men in black, on his property with strange equipment, looking for things in the middle of the day. And the stories that he has relayed with me, and he has been very diligent about reaching out to the community and establishing relationships with key members of the community, and they have stories to tell that are much stranger than what you probably saw and or heard from Hunt for the Skinwalker. Wow.
That's all really fascinating. Matthew has a question about Skinwalker. Did your Native American friend talk about any Native stories with UFO/alien type things that you could share?
He did mention, I asked him about this, and I think that there was kind of the answer that they respected whatever was out there and that they didn't really know what it was, but they always had this reverence for the star beings or things out there. So I didn't get him to elaborate too much, because sometimes just talking to somebody about skinwalkers is good enough. And so I hope that I have another great conversation with him. But
well, someone just said they wondered if Bob Bigelow would ever sell Skinwalker Ranch, and I don't think he has. I don't even think he thinks about it. It's in his portfolio, and that's probably it. He's got so much more going on these days. He's kind of turned away from all that.
Yes, perhaps. Perhaps
I don't know
not.
if you've ever met Bob Bigelow.
I haven't, but I have certainly heard a lot of things about him and done research on him, and I've been fortunate enough to speak with George Knapp on occasion and hear about things. And I do know that Bigelow is doing great things with NASA and all of his stuff. I would find it hard to believe that he wouldn't still have a bit of interest as to what goes on there.
Yeah. So that's it for this part of the show. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to become a member and listen to the full 2-hour shows and plus all the archives on your media player or on the website, of course, all you have to do is pay $2 a month or more to support the show, or you can always pay a one-time yearly fee, and that information's under the Support the Show menu on our website. Thank you for listening. Our guest next week is Ken Pfeiffer, and he's going to be talking about UFO photos worldwide. So I'll be back in the States. Hopefully there won't be any glitches, And thanks again for listening, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.